Welcome to Miniature Mashup. If this is your first time here, you're about to watch a compilation of my videos where I strip HeroClix of their factory paint jobs and repaint them so they can be used in Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. Sometimes there's also a little bit of kit bashing involved. The videos mostly have the same format. I make a few jokes, I compare the prices of the official miniatures to my HeroClix alternatives, and then I get down to the crafting. Somewhere near the end of the video, I usually beg for money to keep from being homeless. The following contains instructions for creating dozens of Dungeons & Dragons miniatures from HeroClix. Here's the order they appear in. Harpies, Mind Flayers, several kinds of zombies, several drow, liches, undead warriors, samurai, nothics, rogues, dryads, pit fiends, ogres, half-orcs, several vampires, stone golems, elves, ettins, and dragonborn monks. The last two clips in this compilation are Mage Knight conversions and repaints, but Mage Knight is basically just the fantasy version of HeroClix, so I threw them in there also. The Greeks had a thing about monster women. The Lamia, the Gorgons, the Sirens, the Furies, the Harpies.
So remember, children, if it has a vagina, it could be a monster, which is why we ancient Greeks have sex with teenage boys. Alright, story time's over. Time for sex with teenage boys. Chop chop.
Zeus gave Phineas the gift of prophecy, and when he shared his knowledge of the gods' secrets with his people, Zeus punished him for it. Yeah, I guess that's what gods did. They gave people superpowers, and when they used them, they got pissy about it. Anyway, Zeus blinded him and placed him on an island with a buffet of food, and it was Golden Corral, and it gave him diarrhea for all eternity. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't Golden Corral. It was a good buffet, but every time he reached to sate his hunger and grab a piece of food, the Harpies would fly out of the sky and rip the food right from his hands. And when the Harpies filled their bellies, they did their dirty birdie business all over the lamb kebabs.
And that's how Greek yogurt was invented.
The Harpies continued to torment King Phineas until Jason and the Argonauts showed up and drove the monsters from the island. According to the ancient legends, Harpies were supposed to embody the destructive power of wind. You know what? Harpies maintained their popularity throughout the medieval period. They even appear in Dante's Inferno, where they populate the Forest of Suicides. If that sounds familiar to you, Neil Gaiman would use this location in his Sandman series. Harpies are the real meat and potatoes D&D monster. They fit in almost any published setting, so it's only natural if you want to give your players a case of Harpies. Oh, the stat block says they come in packs of 7 to 12, so let's just buy 8 pre-painted ones. Oh, that's about $20. So let's see what 8 Reaper bones would cost. Okay, that's also about $20. You know what? I'm gonna make 10 for $3.60. $3.60. We're gonna go to Miniatures Market and we're gonna order Dinosaur. Dinosaur is one of the kooky Great Lakes Avengers.
And she's a big purple dinosaur. It's like Bonnie, remember? That joke's not dated.
This is a recent posting from Miniatures Market. They've got more than 20, which is where they cap off and stop counting. So they have a lot of these in stock, and they are only 35 cents each. Another reason I'm pointing you towards this particular miniature is because she can also stand in for a gargoyle, a succubus, a vampire, a phantom, a werebat, and just so many different generic sort of winged female monsters that this figure could be. And it's a pretty cool sculpt. I know, the pink paint makes it look ridiculous. We're gonna change it up, they're gonna look pretty cool when we're done. So like with all my HeroClix conversions, or at least 99% of them, I'm gonna start by taking them off the base. Now, if I were smart, I'd be holding the base with a nice pair of pliers and using a good pocket knife to just pry them off. But I host videos where men knock cans over with farts, so obviously that's not who you're dealing with here. I'm using a pair of wire snips, which turns out are kind of sharp on the end. Next I'm going to dip them into acetone. Now they are this clear plastic, which is why they're giving me a tougher time than usual. It's more rigid than the typical HeroClix plastic they use, but the upside is it seems really resistant to acetone. You can pretty much just let these soak in there. Let them sit in there for a good amount of time, pull them out. They don't seem any worse for wear, they're not soft, and then you just take the paint right off with the brush. It just falls right off. So once I've done that, I'm going to prime them in black, no surprise there, and I'm going to just give them a nice, quick, dirty, gray dry brushing. Inside the eyes, I'm going to do a dot of orange, so that gives it a highlight, gives it kind of a glow. I'm also going to do the feet in the yellow, sort of like a crow's feet, just to break it up a little bit. The gray just seemed a little lazy to make them a solid gray. I wanted to give them some other kind of detail just to make them more interesting, so I think the yellow feet worked out okay. Once we're done painting them, I'm going to flock the bases with green tea and just a white glue. With that pink paint off, They already look a lot spookier. I wouldn't field them just on the black. I think you do need to do a little more than prime these. They're not that interesting in the solid black. You do want to dry brush some gray on there. Good and eerie. There's something eerie about them, for sure. Now we applied the glue nice and evenly to the base here, the Elmer's glue. It's a little thicker than I like, but that's fine. And we're going to dip this into the green paint nice and evenly. And then I usually blow off the excess, or I'll tap it on the side so I don't get green tea everywhere. One of the most unique monstrous races in all of Dungeons & Dragons, Mind Flayers have the distinction of being one of the few canonically psychic races in 5th edition. They're also one of the few that can double as the corporate mascot of a sushi restaurant chain. Looking at Mind Flayers miniatures, we see that Nolzur's offers a 2-pack for $5, which isn't terrible. But after that, the prices jump up quite a bit, with the pre-paint suffering from gross collector's pricing. The core miniature we're going to start with is the DC HeroClix Dominator. You can buy this guy as a single for somewhere between 60 and 70 cents. Now, as always with HeroClix, we're going to start by taking them off the Clix base. And the way you can do that is by putting them in a vise and hitting them with a chisel. It's probably the fastest. Couldn't find my vise today for this video, so I just braced it up against a weight, and that works just as well. The next step is we're going to dip them into some acetone. I've already got some set aside just for this. And I put them in, I shake them around a little bit, and I actually dropped all 4 in here at once. I let them soak for a while, and then I pull them up, and I start hitting them with a toothbrush. Now I've got a pair of pliers. You don't want to put your fingers into the acetone. And I dip them in with some needle nose pliers holding onto the base, and then I hit them with a toothbrush. The next step is we got to take these ears off. They've got these sort of pointy elfin ears. And I do that just with an X-Acto knife. We just shave them off nice and cleanly. It's okay if you leave a little bump there. That doesn't look too bad, but the cleaner the better. And then I'm going to base these guys. And as always on this show with HeroClix, I use a little E6000. Nice glob of that on there. And I slam it onto a penny. And then any excess, of course, we'll clean off with the toothpick and use to base the next miniature. Just rub a little E6000 on that base. Now there's some paint on those bases, so you want to get that off before you glue them. I just scraped whatever was there to make sure it was really good with my X-Acto. Now I'm using a nice 2-part epoxy. I've got to cut away the old epoxy there that was kind of browning. It had sort of oxygenated. But behind that is nice, good, clean, lighter epoxy, 2-part. And I'm just going to slice off a chunk of that. Roll it up into tiny little snakes here. These, of course, are going to be the face tentacles for our Mind Flayers. We just need itty-bitty ones. And we're just going to start feeding these guys udon noodles with a single chopstick. Just putting it on their face with a toothpick. You don't want to try to put that on with your fingers. It's just a little too difficult, too delicate. But what's nice is the fingerprints left on will give those tentacles a nice texture when you roll them up with your fingers. So that's nice. You don't want them to be too smooth. I don't recommend using a glove while doing this, for example. And I'm just plugging them in different lengths, trying to keep them consistently the same with the thickness, relatively. I'm not much of a sculptor. I think a stronger sculptor could do a better job at this, but you don't have to be much of a sculptor to make these face tentacles and put them on here. You just want to make sure you can seal them out as much as possible. Now the next step is going to be a little PVA glue, because we're going to flock the bases. And I just do a little PVA glue on the base, and then I spread it around with a toothpick. You know, try not to get... You'll see a theme here with typically with glues on this channel. I don't use my fingers or anything. I always try to use some kind of applicator, and I've got a bunch of toothpicks laying around. They're nice and cheap, and so I use them for this. And then, of course, a quick little dip into the craft sand, shake off the excess, and then we're going to let these guys sit overnight. We're going to let that epoxy cure. We're going to let the PVA cure, and the next morning, bright and early, we'll take them outside, and I'm going to hit them with some gray primer. I kind of debated what color to prime them with. I As you see, black would have worked okay because of the base, and then of course I could have made the robes black, which is done on a lot of the miniatures. But I decided to go for red and blue as my base coats for the first pass. So, of course, always starting with a darker color, and then here we are dry brushing, lighter blues and reds onto the clothing. With the red, I actually went to an orange and then a yellow for highlights, and then, of course, some gray highlights on the base itself to really bring out the craft sand, the different textures on it. And then here they are, just sort of based. The next step, of course, once we've done those underlayers, is to hit the skin tone. I'm using Games Workshop Lich Purple for that, but any purple of this type would work. I don't think you want to go too dark because we're going to highlight with pink. So it's really up to you how much contrast you want. I think it's a little more natural if the contrast isn't too strong. And here I am, just dry brushing some pink onto the top. That's the final painting step, guys. The next work is just a little bit of detailing, picking out the eyes and the sleeves. I think they came out pretty great. I'm really happy with the results here. Altogether, we're looking at maybe $3 for 4 miniatures, and that includes the cost of just about everything. It's no secret that I like cheap miniatures, but even I have to admit there's one place where pre-paints like HeroClix, Mage Knight, and HorrorClix falls flat, and that's in the face. And I mean literally falls flat, because there are a bunch of HeroClix where the face is just painted on a flat surface. Luckily, the internet provides. On eBay you can find tons of Warhammer miniature heads, all types, fairly cheap, as well as heads from other box sprue miniatures like Mantic. Now, HeroClix singles with Games Workshop heads will cost pennies per miniature. They look great, and the conversion work is really easy to do. A while back I made some Mind Flayers out of some HeroClix Dominators, and I had to sculpt the face tentacles out of a 2-part epoxy. They look okay, but I'm not much of a sculptor, and the sculpting took some time to do. This week, I'm taking this Genestealer head I bought very cheaply off of Amazon, and just swapping it with the Dominator's head. This whole project from start to finish took less than an hour. The paint on here is just one base coat and then some dry brushing on top. I have to say the tentacles look a lot better than anything I could have managed on my own. Now, a viewer was cool enough to send me some leftover Mantic zombie sprues. Now, I forget who sent these. It might have been Shane. If you sent these to me, go ahead and give yourself a shout out in the comments below. There are a few bodies, but it's mostly heads, and it's an awesome thing to send me because with just a little bit of work, I can make a variety of very cool zombies out of this. For example, so many zombie lines feature giant bloated fat zombies. I want one of those, but I don't want to drop the money that these companies might charge. Well, this Big Bertha HeroClix, you can get her for pennies. Let's put a Mantic zombie head on her, give her a quick paint job, and here she is, a really cool sort of mini-boss for your players to come up against in a zombie encounter. And of course, you can use HeroClix to just make more standard zombies with these Mantic heads. This one is made out of a Project Superman HeroClix, and it looks pretty great. Costs next to nothing. Now, this HorrorClix zombie is supposed to be carrying its own head and I guess the guillotine blade that was used to remove it. Let's get rid of that blade as it doesn't really look like what it's supposed to, and let's give him a much more detailed, frightening Mantic zombie head. Now that's an effective looking miniature. It's scary, it's a zombie, but he's just carrying a head around with him. Maybe that's his friend, maybe it's something he's going to use as a weapon or snack on later. Either way, massive improvement for very little cost. Now, as a quick aside, here's something I've been meaning to address for a while. I make a lot of these HeroClix to D&D conversion videos, and in those videos, I always strip my HeroClix with acetone. Sometimes I modify them. I give them weapons or shields if they need them. And in this case, I did a bunch of head swaps. But HeroClix don't always require any of that stuff. A lot of them can get away with a simple rebasing. And if that level of quality of paint job isn't good enough for you, as it is for me, I will clean up the lines, go in there, pick out details, give them a little wash and a little dry brushing, like I did with these two. This is Scar, the son of the Hulk. He makes a great half-orc barbarian for D&D, and also Jinx, who makes a great female human spellcaster. All I did was go in there and just clean them up a little bit. Let's make some drow out of some HeroClix. Drow are a staple race of Dungeons & Dragons. If you're going to play in the Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk, you're going to run into some drow. And you can get some drow models fairly cheap with 3D printing, although the official models tend to run about $250 a pop or 2 for $5, as you see here with this Nolzur's lot, which isn't terrible, but since they are a mob enemy, you are going to want, between 8 and 10. And 10 models at $250 a pop is $25. It's a little costly. It's not nothing. We can certainly do better with HeroClix. Here I'm using Arwen, Anaconda, and Natalia. Well, those last two are from the IndieClix set. It's real oldie. You can usually grab those guys for about 50 cents a pop or less if you're getting it out of somebody's collection. Anaconda comes from a very early Marvel set. Anyway, of course, we're going to drop them into the acetone. And because these are older models, you can see that they're got interesting colors underneath. They used to come in a variety. While I'm here, I'm also doing Signwinder and Taskmaster and Silver Samurai. Those aren't going to be drow. They're going to be Lich, Undead Warrior, and just a Samurai. But here's our drow ladies. I didn't go through the painting process. Their hair is a light blue undercoat with even lighter blue dry brushed on it. I tend to like blue-black for the skin with lighter highlights. I went with brown leather for the clothing, some black pants, and I did put a weapon into Anaconda's hand. She's a nice big bulky HeroClix, so I just threw a wire in there with a Dremel tool, threw a bead on the end of it, dry brushed it in metal. Makes a really nice mace for her. Up front here I've got a Mage Knight gal that I also turned into a drow. She was some kind of an elven druid or something. Let's see how those other ones turned out. Pretty good. This is our Taskmaster, who is now an Undead Warrior. Just sort of went with a green undead flesh with him and brown clothing. A bit of an enchanted sword effect with a light blue to white gradient on the blade. We've got Silver Samurai here, who's just a regular samurai now. I went with leather, 2 different kinds, brown and black. And our Sidewinder, who is a Serpent Society member, put a little hook weapon in his hand, and I made him a Lich. This week, something that's long overdue, the Nothic, which is sort of a lizard man cosplaying as a beholder. The reason this one's long overdue is because this guy, secondhand online, goes for lots and lots of money. $30 on Miniature Market, $40 on Troll and Toad. Wow, there's an opportunity here. You can make your own and save a bundle, and that's what we're going to do this week. And we're going to start with our Arkillo HeroClix. Now, there's 2 different versions of this character out there. I'm using the older one. He's only 79 cents on Troll and Toad. Start by cutting him off his base with a pair of snips here. He comes from the Collateral Damage set, I believe. I hope I'm right about that, because that set had a lot of sort of background stuff with the miniatures, sort of like lots of terrain that came on the dials. That's what made that one noteworthy. So I'm just snipping that off. Don't have to be too great with the feet. We're going to alter them anyway. And then we're going to take our Dremel tool. Now, I've got an engraving tool here, but if you have a sort of wood boring tool, that'll work as well. And I'm just coming in and I'm taking off his eyes, and I'm leaving a little pit in the head here where we're going to place our Nothic eyeball later. A lot of people have sort of a disdain for the HeroClix as D&D miniatures, and then they go out and buy Nolzur miniatures, which are made by the exact same people. Now, the next thing I'm doing is I'm dropping it into some just pure acetone out of the can. You don't want to leave your miniatures in here too long if they're made of plastic, but HeroClix can take quite a while before they break down under acetone. I give them a nice little minute-long dip, and it gets most of the paint off. As you can see here, you got this sort of yellow plastic underneath. And then I'm going to take those same clippers and I'm going to split the toes of the shoe up to make it look like actual toes, since Nothics don't wear shoes. I'm also going to take a glass bead, use a little E6000, and drop it right into that divot we made in his head. I'm going to let that E6000 sort of spread it around, and we're going to let that sit and dry. And while that's drying, we're going to cut up some spines for our Nothic that goes on the back of his head and his neck, and I'm just cutting this off of a plastic lid. You could use like a plastic yogurt lid. This was a plastic melting chocolate dip. Now I'm going to take a little hot glue, and we're going to cover up that eye, and we're going to sort of form his head out of some hot glue with our hot glue gun. After we're done with that, I'm going to just pull it on down the back, and if there's any little hairs, that's going to look like smaller spines. I'm just sort of stretching that down the back. After that, we're going to take those spines that we created, and we're going to start plugging them in using the hot glue gun as well. We're just going to attach them with little globs of hot glue to the hot glue head, and when it's all said and done, this is what we've got. It's pretty passable as an Nothic now, even before a drop of paint hits it. Now, of course, I'm going to use a Lee 6000. I'm going to put it on the base. I'm also going to spread some extra E6000 on the base, and then dip the whole thing into my craft sand for flocking. Going to take it outside, of course, hit it with a little gray spray primer, bring it back inside when that's dried, and start laying in some green base coats, followed by a dark blue wash from Citadel. Of course, you could use their dark green wash as well. While the wash is drying, I'm going to start working on the base. Just give that a base coat as well. When that's all laid in, I'm going to start with a little dry brushing of yellow on the shoulders, just as a sort of highlight. Guys, I think this came out really great looking, and cost next to nothing. Certainly much, much cheaper than $30 and $40 that you'd find online. Well, that's it for this week, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll come back to you with some more miniature mashup next week. If you like the channel, please like and subscribe. Today we're repainting the DC HeroClix Nightmaster. Sounds like a hairband from the 80s, but is actually a sword and sorcery comic book hero from the 70s. You guys can pick this guy up off of Cool Stuff Inc. for only 35 cents. Here's the sculpt, and here's the comic art the sculpt was based on. This might be a crazy opinion, but I don't think this character translates that well to the tabletop. What I think is supposed to be chainmail in this picture looks like feety pajamas in the miniature. As HeroClix paint jobs go, this isn't bad. The lines are clean, the eyes are well placed, although they do have a little Orphan Annie vibe going. The sword, of course, is very bendy, as is all swords on all Mage Knight and HeroClix figures. Once it's out of the acetone, we'll bend that back into shape. What do you say we drop this guy into some acetone and see what we can do with it? First thing we'll have to do with this guy is get him off the old Oreo cookie, and I'm going to take this particular miniature, because of this large stair base he's standing on, off of his special HeroClix base with a chisel. And I'm chiseling a rubber mallet, and we're just going to pop him right off, and whackety whack. We've got him off the base. Don't have to add a penny or anything to this one because he's so stable because of this stairwell. I've got these old school pliers. I'm going to dip him into some acetone. Pull him out of the acetone, hit him with an old toothbrush. Get as much of that paint off as we can. First round through, not that much. Put him back in. I'm going to do this a couple of times, but the paint comes off pretty quickly. Just with the paint off already, you can see this miniature has some potential. One step at a time here. First, we are going to black bomb it, then we're going to go over all the areas that will have either brown or a brown undercoat. That's going to be his skin, which I did his chest and arms and hands. Also, his boots. I'm going to give him some brown boots. We're going to break that up. We're not going to go with the feety pajama look. I used a little highlighting on the areas that are black. I just used a very dark blue to do that, and that's going to be on the cape and also on his pants. Lastly, we're going to dry brush metal onto the helmet and the forearms to make bracers. I'm going to pick out the details on his belt. We do a gradient dark blue to white on his sword to make it look enchanted. And here he is, the finished product. Not bad for 35 cents, hey guys, considering that most Assassins or Rogue miniatures cost at least $3. Reaper makes a variety of very attractive unpainted Dryad miniatures, but the prices can run quite high on them. $9, $7, $5. The cheapest is this Elven Dryad in the plastic bones format, but she is lugging a planted tree around with her, which makes her really ineffective since she has to use her free action to plant the tree and her move action to climb up, not to mention the encumbrance penalties to movement. Yeah, this kind of miniature drives me nuts, and Reaper does this entirely too often. Like this Reaper rat catcher who needs a Storm Giant's base just because he's got this stupid cage next to him, or this alcoholic dwarf who needs to drag a keg of beer with him everywhere he goes. This guy needs a Ring of Regeneration just for his liver damage alone. But gripes about extra miniature props aside, going to Reaper for Dryads is going to run you some serious money, and they are still unpainted. Looking at the Wizards of the Coast pre-painted Dryad, you can pick one up for $2 $2.50 before shipping. But why would you? It is Dr. Pimple Popper level disgusting. Is that a beautiful fairy of the woods, or is it Helga from Hey Arnold wearing a dress made out of potato salad? Because I think it's Helga from Hey Arnold wearing a dress made out of potato salad. Let me tell you how to bypass all these crappy options and get yourself some of these awesome Dryad miniatures for only 50 cents a piece. Go to trollandtoad.com and get yourself some of these Black Orchid HeroClix miniatures that are only 49 cents before shipping. They've got a few left on Cool Stuff Inc. also for the same price. Black Orchid is a sexy vine-covered hero lady who makes a perfect Dryad. You're going to want to take that HeroClix miniature off its goofy HeroClix base, and the quickest way I've found is to put the base in a vise and use a hammer and chisel to separate them. Then a quick dip into some acetone and a vigorous scrub-a-dub with an old toothbrush will take that awful Chinese child labor paint job right off. This shouldn't take you longer than 90 seconds per miniature. Don't leave your clicks in the acetone too long or they will get soft on you. I like to glue mine to a mysterious copper disc that is most certainly not legal tender protected by any kind of defacement laws. Then I add a little PVA glue and craft sand to flock it and let it sit to dry. Once dry, I'm going to skip priming them as they are plastic and I don't want to work all the way up from black. I don't have any gray on hand, and plus it's too nasty outside weather-wise to use a spray can. So I just added a couple thin layers of old ivy mixed with some black. Starting with any dark green color will work just as well though. I then added highlights with a lighter green on the breast, top of the head, shoulders, top of the legs. And lastly, I dry brushed the lightest green over the vine details on her shoulders, breasts, and limbs, as well as painting and dry brushing on the base. Overall, this is a very easy paint job to do well. One other thing that's noteworthy is that this miniature can also be a stand-in for vine or needle blights. Currently, the needle blight goes for $6 to $7 online, and there is no vine blight available until January of 2019, when it'll come out as part of a $9 set. So even if you don't need dryads, you might want to think about repainting some of these black orchids for use as blights in your game. I was talking about stripping them. Let's do one right now. I'm going to strip this abomination. I'm just dipping them in acetone. If you've watched this show, you know I love the acetone. I'm taking my time on this. This isn't the most effective stripping method. The best thing you can do is stick him in there and brush him while he's under. Brush him while he's under, and that paint's going to slide right off. And he's got a good thick layer of green paint on him. I'm just going to hit that with a toothbrush. Doesn't take too long. Get them off there. Now, normally I put a different base on these miniatures, but one of the things about this, oh, by the way, 15-cent abominations I bought, is they're large. They're really big. They tower over most 28mm scale miniatures. So I'm going to leave them on this big base, which saves me some work. I'm just going to flock it when I'm done painting this guy up. So it saves me some trouble. And as you can see, that paint is sliding off nicely. He's a nice white plastic underneath, and there he is. I'm also going to cut off some bat wings off of some holiday novelty bats from Halloween that are left over. There's probably a quarter for the bag of bats. I'm going to put some wings on this guy, and you probably can figure out where I'm going direction-wise once I do that. Now, because these wings are sort of a rubber, they don't really have a good way of sticking on there, I am going to pin them, which means taking a Dremel tool, drilling in as far as you can go. I put 2 pieces of copper wire into him, nice and deep. I use hot glue on them, and then I slide the wings. Well, I twist the wire into his back with the hot glue, then I put the wings on, they fit on just perfectly, and then I hot glue those on as well. And they're going to be nice and sturdy when that's all set up like that. You can see and spin them around. Already with the black primer, he already looks tabletop worthy. Let's be honest, that looks awesome. Just a big black demon, cool demon wings, a really nice miniature, 15 cents. But I'm going to take it a little further because I can paint. I'm going to put a little wine as the color I use as a base. It's sort of a purplish red, you know, as in red wine. I'm going to do 2 coats of that. It's going to dry a little thin on the black. So we're going to hit him with the 2nd coat of that. It's going to be a nice solid wine color. And then I'm going to dry brush orange on top of that. And that's going to hit the highlights really nice. Really bring out some of the texture on his skin, because he's got this sort of pebbled skin, especially on the head and the face. And it's going to really look good. I'm not going to do the membranes of the wings. We're just going to do sort of the wing muscle and bone. That's the highlight on the orange. Now we're going to use yellow to bring out the horns and the teeth and the eyes. And I do his pants in sort of a metallic black to make it look sort of like black leather. coming S&M thing, and here he is next to the original Abomination. Again, this is a 15-cent miniature. For $1.50, you can have 10 giant demons on your game table. Thank you, HeroClix and Acetone. It's just that cheap and easy. Ogres are another staple race of Dungeons & Dragons. You're certainly going to run into them in most modules at some point. We've got one of those adventure books. Most of them include an ogre somewhere, even if you're starting with the Mines of Pandelver. But ogres themselves do tend to run a little high, $3 to $4 per a pop. If you're going to have a mob of ogres, you're certainly going to want to go a little cheaper, or you can anyway, depending on what your wallet's at. I think these hulks are very nicely sculpted from HeroClix, but they are going to run you a lot less. You can typically grab a hulk for 50 cents. Depending on the model, they come in different rarities, but Hulk gets put out in pretty much every other Marvel set. There's lots of them out there. Some of them are very common. A lot of the older ones are unplayable, and people are just looking to dump them from their HeroClix collection. So there's no trick to getting your hands on them. This one I'm going to strip down. I've got to use a Dremel tool to put a little hole in his hand so he can hold a weapon. I'm giving him kind of like a metal shiv, just sort of a metal dagger. It's really just a bit of a wooden skewer. You could certainly put something a little better in there than that, but I'm going for the cheapy cheap. I'm going to make him a wooden shield by chopping up a bunch of craft sticks and a Halloween novelty skull ring, which is going to be on the face of it. I'm going to glue all that together with hot glue. Hot glue I find is very good for wood on wood or wood to plastic. The overall effect is going to be pretty cool. I'm going to throw that shield on his front arm so it's sort of blocking any incoming attacks, and he's sort of winding up with the stabbing arm in the back. Just throwing that together. And of course, Hulk as an ogre is nothing new. There was a Marvel set put out by a toy company a long time ago, and then had lost the rights to the Marvel characters, and they kept using the same molds. They just altered them slightly and turned Hulk into sort of a caveman / ogre. That's a true story. It was a Timmy, Timee Toys actually did that. Now I'm putting a pretty good washer with E6000 as a base, good size washer underneath. A nice metal base under a plastic miniature makes them very stable. I'm using a black undercoat, which is something I don't do much anymore. This is an older model, and it works okay on this model. I usually like to work up from gray now. Start with gray, and the colors tend to be more vibrant. It doesn't actually hurt this. I do like the way this paint job ends up coming out, in spite of the fact that I do a black prime. When you start out, I just find most kids, or I say kids, I was a kid when I started painting, start with that black prime, and then you can just sort of put layers on it, and it gives you that automatic shadow, you know, so it's not a bad starting place. You don't need to black line things as much, especially if you're just doing a lot of dry brushing. So it's a way to go, but probably not the best way. I think once you start to maybe develop a little more brush skill, it's better to start with gray. I know a lot of people do Zenithal, if that's something you like, and that's where you hit it with gray and then put a white primer on the top. Anyways, you can see I start with, I believe, burnt or raw sienna or burnt or raw umber on this model, just for the flesh tone undercoat, and then I think I'm just putting some kind of a flesh tone over it, either a dark or a fair skin tone. I really don't remember. It's been a while. I'm just sort of watching this video along with you. The sound on this one was so bad, I've actually re-narrating this in 2022, so throw down a fresh vocal track here for you, just because the original is terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. This is, like I said, a very early video from me, but I still like the project, even if I didn't like the video production that much. You know, converting HeroClix into D&D and Pathfinder models is a great way to save money. Another great way is to stop at my eBay store and pick up some curated, pre-painted models. So there's some hand-painted stuff mixed in. I've got lots and lots of different lots. They go for about $2 a piece, but the shipping's always free. And hey, you can even make me an offer. Maybe I'll cut you a deal if you buy in bulk. How about that? If you'd like to see pictures of these projects or any project that we've done on this channel, go over to our Facebook page at miniaturemashup.com. Facebook Miniature Mashup. I've got a Patreon, I've got a GoFundMe. The links for both are in the description below. Feel free to help us out. We sure could use it. If you're looking for a deal on graphic novels or comic books, my eBay store has that too, so check it out. Alright, back to the video. As you can see, there's a lot of dry brushing going on here on this model. And let's see how this turned out overall. Pretty solid little ogre. Got kind of a nasty yellow for his pants that I like. It's got sort of a curdled milk look, and he just blends in just fine with my other ogres. Just really put him right next to some official Reaper ogres, and he completely works, completely blends in with them. It's very nice. Welcome back to another episode of Miniature Mashup. Today I'll be converting this blob miniature from HeroClix into something for D&D. This is the original blob miniature put out by HeroClix. It came out in the Clobbering Time set. There have been 2 other sculpts, and any of them would make good fodder for your D&D game. This guy could be a half-orc, a half-ogre, a Norse rock troll, really any kind of bulky, beefy meathead. As a HeroClix figure, he's not really that good. He's badly designed, and the newer pieces are so much better for half the cost. Personally, I wouldn't use this miniature even in a superhero role-playing game, even if it was in an X-Men game, much for the same reason that Marvel Comics stopped using this character in their comics. I mean, I'm not just going to dump on Blob. I have mixed feelings about him as a villain. I've read a lot of good stories that include him. He was always a good foil for Colossus, because Colossus is all hard and he's all squishy. And, he was visually interesting in that he was physically different than every other character in his universe. Well, okay, except maybe for Big Bertha. But let's be honest, Blob's power set, being so fat that he can't be moved, that's like a 5-year-old's idea of what a supervillain is. Now, I know from personal experience that there's nothing really super about being a big fat dude. And too often, the Blob would become a bad caricature of fat people. You know, he farts, he burps, he loads up on ice cream. They were only a few issues away from Blob weaponizing his crotch fungus and breast milk. It would be one thing if the Blob just happened to be fat, but his villainous nature is tied to his weight. And Marvel already has a badass fat villain, and Kingpin doesn't need the Blob stepping on his brand. Now, unattractive villains are nothing new. It's true, hell, it's half the point of Dick Tracy, but having a villain who makes light of real health issues is another. Marvel Comics has done this before. This leather daddy is Razor Fist, whose superpower is that he's a double amputee. Yeah, somehow having no wrists makes him a master swordsman with blades on his hands. I get that having blades on your hands 24/7 would make you very good with them, but not necessarily good at fighting Captain America, more like good at making breakfast and changing the cat box. There's also Gin Genie, a character whose powers were tied to her alcoholism. Someone needs to remind the folks at Marvel Comics that Bluntman and Chronic are a parody. In the current continuity, Blob has lost all the weight but is now suffering from all the health problems related to obesity. It seems like Marvel's decided to jump ship on this problematic character. I mean, heavy kids read comics, and a lot of them escape into the Marvel Universe to get away from problems they might be having at school. The last thing they want to see is their favorite mutant beating up a fat guy. Anyway, that's enough of me editorializing. Let's take a look at the project today. Of course, we're going to start by dipping our Blob HeroClix into some acetone, shaking it around, pulling him back out, hitting him with the brush, and dipping him in again. I'm doing it very briefly. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of paint on him, so I'm just dipping him very quickly, pulling him back out, hitting him with the brush, dipping him again. Just repeat until all the paint's off. I'm also going to use a little E6000 to stick a penny on his base to add a little more weight. I didn't glue him to any kind of a special base. I actually cut the HeroClix base up so I wouldn't have to re-glue him. I figure, why reinvent the wheel? And here he is with all the paint stripped off him. He's kind of a yellowish green. I've got this pack of weapons and shields from Norse Saga, I guess is the game. It's only like 11 bucks on eBay. Not a bad deal. There's a lot of stuff in here. I don't feel like sculpting weapons. Sometimes I want to do something other than a mace. It's about what I can do with beads and wire. For 10 bucks, I don't mind buying a pack of shields and weapons to turn superhero figures into D&D monsters. Now, I'm going to shave his wrist down a little bit. I'm going to Dremel a hole into his other hand. I shave his wrist down so the shield will fit on better. We use E6000 to fix both of those things onto his arms. I'm adding a little white PVA glue to his base. We're going to sprinkle some craft sand on there. We're going to let him sit overnight, dry. And then here he is, fully painted.
Fatty doo-doo.
Who's that scooting on a scooter, fatty doo-doo? Who's Who's got doo-doo like a fatty Scooty-Doo?
What?
Nobody scoots a fatty doo like you do. Scatty foo-foo. Patty poo-poo.
Reaper Miniatures produces a pair of very nice-looking Vampire Spawn minis. You can get these two for $9 before shipping. If you want to throw a pack of 4 vampires at your players, though, you're going to spend as much as you would on this tasteful gold chain, which is both durable and long-lasting. And you'll have to put up with the fact that all your vamps go to the same stylist. Now, Wizards and Paizo both produce pre-painted Vampire Spawn miniatures. You can get a male from each line for $3.50 a piece, but if you want to break up the sausage party, the female Vampire Spawn Mini by Wizards retails for $5. And that's if you can find her in stock. If you're working the math, that's $12 before shipping for a pack of 3 pretty awful looking miniatures. Instead of doing that, I'm going to tell you how to get these awesome Vampire Spawn miniatures for just pennies. The Vampire Spawn are largely human-looking, but with a vicious, feral cast to them. Luckily, that describes a bunch of HeroClix you can get online for only pennies. Head over to Troll and Toad and check out this Cheetah HeroClix for only 49 cents. You want the Silver Age Cheetah. She's the one with the Halloween costume and the pointy ears. Now, sadly, Wild Child and Sabretooth are the other two I'm using for this project, and they're out of stock on Troll and Toad, but you don't need those specific HeroClix. There are plenty of others that fit the bill. There's a variety of Tigra minis you can get for 50 cents or less. There's Puma, there's Feral, and the Red Beast Boy. You can probably find others as well. This was just a quick search I did, and let me show you how I found all of these different sculpts so quickly. Go to hcrealms.com, that's hcrealms.com, go to Units, go to Advanced Search. You can now search under keywords. The keyword I used to find these miniatures was animal. Animal was the keyword. But you can use it to find many other things. If you need robot miniatures for a game, you can use the keyword robot, and it'll pull up a variety of robots from different sets. It'll also show you which miniatures are common and uncommon. Those are going to be the cheapest to get secondhand. I'm not sure if you can buy them off HC Realms or not. I know there's a trading section on this site, but you can open up another tab in your browser and get on something like Troll and Toad, and this should make searching for HeroClix minis that you need a little bit easier for you. Hope it's some help. Okay, now that you have your HeroClix, you're going to want to take them off the old Oreo cookie. The easiest way to do that is put them in a vise and knock them off with a hammer and chisel. If you decide to do this project with either Cheetah or Tigra, you are going to have to remove their tail. For this, I used my Dremel cutting tool to first take the tail off and then to sort of flatten the little nub behind. Don't go too deep, you don't want to make them anatomically correct. A quick dip in acetone and a little scrubbing with a toothbrush and you should have something that looks like this. People who dump on HeroClix sculpts need to see this bit of footage here. This is what lies underneath those hideous factory paint jobs. And it's not bad. I use a little E6000 to adhere these to some dead president's face. Then a little PVA glue brushed onto the base, and then a quick dip in craft sand for some flocking. I let all of that dry overnight, and then I hot glue them all onto the same flat piece of wood. This will save me time since I'm going to be painting them with the same palette. I won't have to put down and pick up individual miniatures as I'm painting. I can treat all 3 of them as one larger miniature. Then I start with gray primer. I dry brush a lighter gray over that, then a burnt sienna on the clothes. I want a red leather look. I'm not sure I'm pulling it off, but I do dry brush some red over the burnt sienna. The hair is black with gray and purple highlights. I then pick out the details, including a black wash. Let's take a look at the miniatures. I think they turned out pretty good. Welcome back to Miniature Mashup, everybody. This week we're going to make ourselves a couple of golems. Now, golems are creatures from Jewish folklore. They're animated by a rabbi, and they come to the aid of the Jewish people in their times of need. Of course, the golems we're talking about are a staple of fantasy fiction. You can find them in all kinds of fantasy literature, and they're very prominent in Dungeons & Dragons, having many forms and types. This week we're going to make ourselves a iron/ mechanical slash clockwork slash steam powered golem, and we're also going to make a clay slash stone golem. We can look through Reaper bones. They're pretty reasonably priced, to be perfectly honest. You can get the clay or the stone golem for only $3, but of course we're going to do a little better here using just scraps of stuff we've got left over. You could find an iron golem for $6, but this clockwork golem is, wow, that is really high. Now we're going to start the clay slash stone golem project off with Awesome Andy. He's an early hero click. He's got a weird head, and we're going to take that off. And we're going to give him a couple of beads here. These are Buddha head beads. Then there's all kinds of people who make these. You can get a sack of these pretty cheap. I want to say I got a sack of like 30 for $3. And they're only one-sided. They're flat on the other side. So I'm going to glue two together just to give him a complete head here. Now I'm using E6000 to glue them together, and I'm going to scrape off any excess glue off the side with a toothpick. And I'm just going to take his head off with a safety knife. With our razor knife here, it comes right off. It's not too hard to get through that. And then using E6000 again, I'm going to glue that on. But first, of course, we're going to take him off the base using a pair of tiny wire cutters. And we're going to put him on a nice large size base. I believe this is a Malifaux base. Also E6000. Pretty much E6000 all around for this project, as it's mostly gluing plastic to plastic. Make sure I got the head set the way I like. And then of course we'll do a little PVA glue on the base. Spread that around with a toothpick. And then give him a quick dip into our craft sand. And he's ready to be primed. Now with this project I'm not going to go too dark, so I'm just going to prime him in a nice gray flat primer. It's a dollar store rattle can. Then the next step is to just give him a wash in Citadel's Nuln oil. That's a tough one to say, just to get in all those cracks there. And we're going all over him with that. And then we're going to dry brush him with a lighter gray. And a little bit lighter gray on the highlights, shoulders, top of the head, things like that. And then we'll do the base in brown. I'm also going to pick out the eyes with a little bit of orange and red. Not in love with the color choices I made here on the eyes. I probably should have did just some sort of a light effect. All white or all black would probably have been more effective. Corrosion to give him some dripping oil effects and some rust look. Guys, I think these both turned out pretty great for what they're supposed to be and for the price I paid. Especially like my little clockwork golem. There's been a little bit of a Mage Knight renaissance in these last couple of years, as we've seen a board game in 2015 and a video game. A new legend arises, and by new we mean hacky and recycled. Featuring Brawn Beefknuckle, a cantankerous no-nonsense dwarf, and a cover illustration from the magazine known as Heavy Metal. Oh my goodness, this is from 2015? I think there are more polygons in my stool. Unlimited customization, awesome. I've always wanted to play a two-headed dwarven Unitarian. Oh, I think they just mean on the clothing. Alright, so the video game's not very good, but I hear good things about the board game. In the early 2000s, Jordan Weissman along with Kevin Barrett changed the fantasy tabletop wargaming landscape with Mage Knight. This was remarkable, as many upstarts have tried and failed to take a piece of the 800-pound gorilla that was Warhammer Fantasy. But Mage Knight was very successful, making $30 million in just the first 2 years. This is undoubtedly due to the innovations of collectability and the combat dial. The combat dial simulated damage on each figure. As they took injury, they'd change tactics and become less effective. This may have been the result of Jordan Weissman's previous work on Battletech, a game where fighting robots would have systems knocked offline when they took damage. The dial would go on to appear in many more games, most notably HeroClix, a game that I myself have played for years, the short-lived HorrorClix, and MechWarrior games, as well as a few other odds and ends. Now, I have to tell you, when I first saw Mage Knight figures, I was grossed out by them. Many of the paint jobs made the miniatures look worse than if they were just released unpainted. And my friends were simply rebasing them and putting them right onto their tabletops. They were distractingly ugly for me. At the time, my miniatures were Ralph Parther, Reaper, Games Workshop. I was an okay painter, and Mage Knight just didn't meet my aesthetic standards. I didn't know about stripping miniatures back then, so I just embellished the ones my friends were using with a simple wash and some highlighting, and it can really work miracles. Here on Miniature Mashup, we've done some Mage Knight conversions before. This Drow Sorcerer, this Troll Warrior, this werewolf, and this orc all came from Mage Knight figures. And so I've ordered a little bit over 100 Mage Knight figures on eBay. It cost me about 33 bucks. So each figure is 33 cents, and that is an amazing deal on miniatures, especially considering some of them are size large. Here they are. Here's everything I ordered. Pretty good selection. Lots of stuff. You know, the reason I ordered these is because they're things I'll see myself stripping and converting and painting. Let's start with this Elven Zealot. Now, as you can see, she is painted like Dookie. Just terrible. I'm not even sure that is acrylic paint. It almost looks like watercolors because the under plastic is showing through so strongly. There's no color on the face other than flesh tones. I mean, at least they painted within the lines, but it's just, she looks washed out and yellow and awful. So I'm going to start off by prying her off the base. I'm going to convert her because I don't have a lot of Elven miniatures to begin with. Yeah, I'm going to try and do something nice for my girlfriend. We've both started working full-time, so we're probably not going to get to play a lot of D&D. We kind of had to leave our D&D group because we're not available, but, you know, once in a while maybe we can throw down some Frostgrave or something, so I'm going to make her a new Frostgrave Sorceress out of this Elven miniature. And I'm going to dip her in some acetone with my vice grip, pull her out, scrub her with a toothbrush that I have just for peeling paint off of pre-painted miniatures. Here she is, unpainted, and you can see she looks better without the paint. I mean, that's what's remarkable about Mage Knight miniatures. And while I was at it, I stripped the other one too, because I do like this miniature, but I cannot stand the paint job. A little E6000 and a penny, and we've got her on her new base. It's a nice heavy metal base to keep her stable. The other miniature we're going to be doing this week is this Ironblood Ettin. I don't actually have an Ettin figure for D&D. Same thing, I'm going to pry him off using these wire cutters. I find nothing's better than a pair of wire cutters for getting HeroClix miniatures off, because they pry and cut. The only downside is you can poke yourself in the finger, which is something I do pretty frequently. Luckily, this miniature's feet are very tiny because he is sort of a resculpt of a Minotaur, which is why he's got the cow tail and cloven feet. Cloven hooves, I guess, I should say. And he, believe it or not, stands up on his own. I am going to strip him, same way, with the vice grips, in an old butter container and some acetone. Just put him in there, pull him out, hit him with a toothbrush, and he cleans up pretty good. Here he is all in his naked yellow plastic. Now, the only reason to be an Ettin is so you can wield two weapons effectively with that nice +7 bonus, so I've got to give him a second weapon. He's not going to use that hand to scratch himself in combat, so we're going to Dremel a hole into his hand and also into his feet, because, as you know, if you watch this show on large plastic miniatures, I like to screw them into their bases instead of using glue. I mean, I use glue too, but I also use small machine screws to put them into their plastic bases to make sure they're held firmly. Now, I've constructed a Morning Star for him out of a bit of wire and a large plastic jewel bead, and as you can see, I've got him screwed into his base. We've got a nice 2x2 large base square, which I cut out of some plastic for him. We're then going to put some glue on the top of the base, because we're going to begin flocking it. This is slightly watered down white PVA glue, and then we put the craft sand over that, and I'll let him sit overnight while that cures. Let's take a look and see how our Elven Zealot turned out. Here we are, just going through the different steps of painting, including highlights and shadows and then base coat. And here's a look at the finished project from a couple of different angles. I thought she came out okay. I'm much happier with how the Ironblood Ettin turned out. Let's take a look. When you do a Google search for a Dragonborn monk, the first thing that comes up is Hero Forge, and that's not good. On their website, you can customize a figure and get yourself a perfectly bland little $20! Good lord, moving on. Reaper has one unarmed Dragon Man, and I guess it's a monk, but boy do I not care for this sculpt. It's sort of a bulky guy who looks more like a pit fighter than the light lean form that tends to typify a martial artist. And looking through their line, they do have a few other Dragon Men that sort of might work, but all of them run about $6 a piece. Here's where the Draconum race from Mage Knight comes into play. Now, not all of them make good Dragonborn, just the youngest form of Draconum, known as the Whelp. I have 2 of them here, but there are other Whelp models out there. Now, I'm not telling you to try and hunt down these specific miniatures. It'll end up costing you as much or more than the equivalent Reaper miniature. What I am saying is try to keep an eye out for Mage Knight lots with Whelps in them. They not only make great Dragonborn monks, but also Dragonborn sorcerers. We're going to start by putting our Mage Knights into a vise and knocking them off their special base with the chisel. Rubber mallet and chisel and a vise is the best way to get these Mage Knight figures off their bases. Then I'm going to drop them into some acetone, revealing what I like to call opportunity yellow underneath. I am going to chop off their chain. I'm going to use Lily 6000 on their feet and then stick them onto a penny. After that, I'm going to take some watered down glue. I'm going to smear that on the penny using a cheap vinyl brush. Get a nice even coat on there. After that, I'm going to dump some craft sand on them. Let that sit for at least an hour. Probably best to let it sit for 4 to 6 hours, maybe even overnight. Once that sand and glue are set, I'm going to take it outside and hit it with some black primer. And we're going to start applying a brown base coat to both colors. Now I'm making a red and a gold. I'm just going to add thin layer after thin layer of paint, starting with the lowest surfaces and working my way to the top. When it's all finished, I hit it with a glossy varnish to sort of seal in my paintwork and also to make them look a little slimy. Overall, I'm very happy with the results. I think they came out pretty good. What's not showing up here on camera is actually how metallic the golden Dragonborn actually is. And my girlfriend says the gold one looks like Crow T. Robot if he were played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, as always. If you'd like to come visit us on Facebook, you can. You can see more photos of this project. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider donating to my GoFundMe campaign. The link's in the description below. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.